Hello and welcome DMs and new DMs alike to our very first video. My name is Lee, the DM of the new D&D podcast show Behold This Crit, cursed as the forever DM and overall nerdy guy, and today I'm here to teach you some tips and tricks to start DMing your own game. To start off, allow me to be the first to welcome you to these ancient and hallowed halls of those who simultaneously love what they do but at the same time question why they ever started to do it. But don't worry, it's really not as hard as it sounds. Now, to preface this video, some of my tips are kind of obvious and some of them are kind of conceptual. And I did that on purpose because being a DM is kind of like wearing a bunch of different hats. I mean, you're literally wearing a bunch of different hats with all the different characters you're playing. And that can be very overwhelming. But that kind of leads me to my first tip. And that is reading. Now, don't click off yet. There's a lot of other tips in this one, but I wanted to start off with reading specifically because it's one that I really personally struggled with. I know nobody became a DM because they wanted to read all of the books inside and out, and I'm not saying that you have to do that, but what I am saying is that the Dungeon Master is the Dungeon Master. He's kind of the guy that decides everything that happens in the game, the end-all, be-all of the game, and your player's going to look and hold you to that. They're going to come to you with a lot of different questions, some of them more frustrating than others. I originally had a funny bit here where I pulled out all of these books and kind of made a joke about how much reading there was to being a DM, but the point of this isn't to overwhelm you, it's to help you learn how to DM, so I'm going to skip that bit. What I'm getting at is no, you don't need to know everything, but you at least need to know the core mechanics of the game. If you're not one to sit down and read the books, then I highly suggest playing a couple of different games as a player. Maybe go to your local board game store. They almost always have adventure leagues going. But as my point is, the more you play the game, the more comfortable you're going to get, and the more knowledge you're going to gain from it, which leads me directly into my next point. Be confident. Trust me, I understand how difficult being confident is. I mean, look at me. Do I look like a shining example of confidence? This single take probably took me at least 4 different recordings. One of the DM's best tools in their arsenal is something called the handy dandy DM screen. Not only does it provide a barrier between your awkward self and the players, but it also has a bunch of information in here to help you remember all of the different rules and stuff in the game. There's a lot in it. Honestly though, while the DM screen is a very powerful tool to utilize, the #1 best tool in any DM's tool belt is confidence. You may or may not know everything, but speaking to your players with an aura of confidence gives them trust that you do know what's going on and that you have a handle on the situation and what's happening in the game. If you don't know the answer, that's okay. It's okay to improvise and pull something out of nothing. The important part about that is to expect the unexpected and to improvise with confidence. Improvisation in D&D, improvisation in D&D, from my experience, is always the most rewarding and enjoyable experience you and your players can have at the table, and generally it leads to some of the most interesting and fun NPCs in your game. For example, my players wanted to find a flower shop in the city as they're aspiring herbalists, but of course, I didn't have a flower shop planned. Of course, why would I have a flower shop planned? Who would plan a flower shop in D&D? I had at least 20 armor shops, 20 weapon shops, magic shops, inns, taverns, but why in the ever-living hell that is being a dungeon master would I not forget a flower shop? Anyways, the moral of the story is that I ad-libbed the character. After a bit of searching, the party stumbled across what looked like a children's lemonade stand, with a large Goliath standing behind this tiny little counter. Children were holding flowers and singing around it. They walked up to him, and now Meaneth, the Goliath flower shop entrepreneur, is employed by my Council of Nib as their head herbalist. Either way, the most important thing about that wasn't that I was prepared for such a turn of events, because I definitely wasn't, but rather how I handled the unexpected with an aura of confidence. Now, on the inside, I was panicking. Oh god, what's gonna happen? I don't have any flower shops planned, blah blah blah. But the players didn't see that. I pretended like I knew what was going on, and that confidence builds trust with your players. It helps them become engrossed in the world around them as a living, breathing entity, rather than just kind of a straightforward tank and spank adventure. Which is a great segue into my next tip: let the players drive the adventure. Now this one sounds kind of obvious, but it can be the difference between being a decent DM and being a great DM, which is kind of funny because this is one of those things that a lot of newer DMs struggle with. Many aspiring DMs can easily fall into a trap known as railroading. Now, for those of you who don't know, railroading is when the DM has rigid control over the flow of the story and forces the players down a single path. A railroad, if you will. Now, this isn't done with a malicious intent, but rather it's a side effect from having a lack of confidence from my previous tip. Now, this generally happens to newer DMs when the unexpected happens, and they kind of retreat back into what they know or what they've prepared, and they don't let the players have the freedom, which kind of leads to this feeling of being stuck in a single narrative. I'm not saying that having a single overarching storyline is a bad thing, but you need to at least have a couple of little plot points or leads for your players to engage with so that you can turn it back into the main plot. You don't need to have a new lead for every single NPC that they meet, but you need to make sure that each of those leads that you do introduce can be flexible and can be changed depending upon where the party appears to be heading, and then in between sessions you can kind of figure out how to tie it all back into the main plot. Maybe a shop owner keeps having random pieces of weaponry stolen and he hasn't figured out where they're going. Maybe that shopkeeper's nephew is going through a phase and is stealing them to get in good with some sort of cult that follows the big bad evil guy. Or perhaps the local wildlife is getting more and more aggressive towards a village because they're getting shoved out of their natural habitat due to the actions of the big bad evil guy. Sometimes when the party gets their mind set on something, it's almost impossible to convince them otherwise. Like when a gnome shopkeeper has a funny voice, has to be a part of an evil cult because she had them arrested for breaking into their shop at night, because that's definitely not something a normal shopkeeper would do. But why not run with it? What's the harm in improvising and saying, you know what, this gnome didn't have any real plot points, and maybe she was up late guarding because she had been having things stolen by the evil cult, right? What's so hard to believe about that? Don't panic. The players will eventually go the completely wrong direction, and you cannot stop that. Just roll with it, and when you have downtime after the session, give it some thought, and you can pretty much turn any side quest into the master story arc. Being a DM is one of the most fun and rewarding hobbies you can have. Not only do you get to craft and weave the player's universe and reality with the last tip I gave you, but you also get to live out your dreams of being a pirate. Which leads me to my last tip: take all of the things. Now, I don't mean be a klepto and hoard all of the dice behind your fancy new DM screen, no matter how tempting that may be. What I mean is take inspiration from stories and adventures that you like. Really like Lord of the Rings? Perfect. Let's take Schmeagol. Let's take him and move him into a gnome with a split personality, shopkeep, who eventually wants to take revenge on the party for one reason or another. Really like World of Warcraft. Even in my game that I'm running right now, Behold the Crit, a lot of inspiration is taken from World of Warcraft herbs and potions and such, because I know that and I'm comfortable in it. There's even a bunch of websites to help DMs get inspiration, like the Home Brewery or the DMs Guild. I mean, hell, even Matt Mercer wrote an entire book, Wizards of the Coast book, about his campaign setting of Tal'Dorei and Eastern Exandria. And if you haven't read it, take a look, because it is amazing to see how that guy's mind works. But the best part about being a DM is probably the amount of support that other DMs give one another. I'm part of at least 10 different Facebook groups and subreddits in a collective that the DMs call a hive mind. And we all talk and spread ideas and just kind of go back and forth about what happened in games, and it's really helpful for inspiration. Just remember when you're doing this that it's not stealing, it is creative repurposing. And that's really all there is to it, guys. I know this wasn't really groundbreaking technology or information, but really the one thing you need to get from this video is confidence. And I don't mean you have to be confident, I mean you have to act confident. Trust me, this video took me like 5 hours and at least 50 takes of each of these clips that you're seeing. But you don't see that because look at me, I'm acting confident. No amount of reading, no amount of other campaigns is going to prepare you for that confidence that you give to your players. And that is what's going to give you the most fulfilling gameplay that you can get. You know, you can sit there and read and come up with a list of hundreds and hundreds of NPCs and character names. But, you know, if you want to come up with a funny shopkeep, bada bing, bada boom, here's Mac Terry, the gnome shopkeep. How you doing, everybody? Welcome to my shop. Today we're having a special on candles and fish sticks. I hope you enjoy. Like, and you don't even need to do a funny voice. You just have to pretend like that NPC was there that whole time. Even though he wasn't. Jerry, Terry, whatever the hell his name was, wasn't there. I just pulled that name out of nothing. But you feel like, you get what I'm saying? You gotta have that aura that you know what you're talking about and that you're not surprised by what the players do. Because as soon as the players surprise you and they can tell that they surprised you, it kind of breaks that immersion. And that immersion is what makes the games so much fun. And if you can prevent that and you can make those players believe that, damn, they are the heroes, or that they're nobodies and they're trying to find their way in the world, and this world moves without them happening or without them doing anything, it moves around them, even though it's really not, then you're a good DM. The best DMs say a little, but say a lot with those words. If you ever watch Matt Mercer, he describes everything. And I know Matt Mercer, people have mixed opinions on the guy. I think he's brilliant. He's a great DM, the Mercer effect, whatever you want to say about him. I love the show, great DM. But the dude's words, he picks his words so meticulously. The way he speaks and what he says 5 words and the players are like, whoa, he just blew my whole world apart. That's because he's confident. He knows everything. Even if he doesn't necessarily know everything, the players think he does. And that is what gives you those moments in Critical Role where they're like, what? No way! And if you want that kind of gameplay, if you want people invested in your game, you need to give them confidence. And that confidence is something that's only going to come with practice. And that's it. And I know I just kind of rambled for the last 2 minutes of this video, but that's it. With that all being said, everybody, that is the end of the video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please give us a check on twitch.tv/beholdthiscrit to see our live stream show we do every week, Friday at 7 p.m. EST. We're about 15 episodes deep right now, and the story's just starting to get really good. So if you get a chance, please check that out. We upload the VODs here every other week or so. And please let me know what you thought of the video down below. I know it was kind of short, but realistically, if you do have any questions or if you want my intake on anything or anything like that, please let me know. I'd love to help new DMs or just DMs in general. I'd love to, expand the hive mind, if you will. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. I hope to see you on our live stream Fridays at 7 p.m. EST. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful evening. I was supposed to stop earlier. This chair is really, really good.